Well, hello investors and traders. I'm L.A. Little and this is your weekly NeoTA wrap, where we take a look at these markets and we do it from a neoclassical perspective. Each time we're asking ourselves what happened this week and what does it tell us about the coming ones. Do this show once a week, every Sunday evening broadcast at or before 10 o'clock Eastern Time. I archive it on YouTube. It's under the channel L.A. Little. If you haven't subscribed, you can reach up there and do so. Content, anytime it's pushed, you'll get a notification, so it's an easy way to stay up with what's happening. If you look at what's happening here, this past week, nice big rise. You're down, 10%, 6% if you're on the listed issues, 10% on the others. So what's next? Let's take a look at the charts and see what we got happening here. On the S&P 500, you can see the big rise on Friday, right? Some follow through on the holiday shortened week, a little hammer reversal here on Friday on the S&P 500. If we pull it over, which we try to do on this show, and look at a little longer term perspective, you can see that the test here, right, actually broke underneath. That's why you have this green arrows showing a bearish trend, but it also tested underneath and back over, which is what led to the nice reversal. The big test coming up now is the bearish retest regen. Starts here, goes up to there on the weekly time frame, not on the daily. If we pull that down just a little bit so that we encompass it, you can see that's up around 1950 something, 1954. And we're trading it here at about 1917. So, there's a decent little path that it can go in terms of getting up there. You've got kind of this consolidation area up there before. You had it down at this area. Now the question is are you going to try to break it up or are you going to try to break it down again? And so there's not much on this particular picture telling you what's going to happen. It's simply saying, hey, there is a retest regen going on. Already, you got another one up above you, and so let me make that clear. You've got a retest regen going on here, and then you've got the other one up above you, and so that overlap is the key resistance zone, and so this is the area that should be pretty hard, which of course is what we were just pointing out on the bottom of this swing point low is the start of it. So that's what the S&P looks like. Move over to the NASDAQ. It's a little bit different of a picture. Right, not the same setup. In the same setup here, you're doing the bearish retest regen right now. You're still inside of it on the daily chart. If we move this over and take a look at it on a weekly time frame, the NASDAQ didn't break the lows. It got down, tested them, but closed it over them. So the swing point low that was broken is this one over here. So if you go over and draw that one in and say, what's that bearish retest regen look like? It's just a little bit higher is where it starts. It would be the second attempt at it. So again, the odds are not too bad. And if you go up like we did on the S&P 500 and you draw it in, you say, okay, what is that overlap? The overlap area is, of course, up there. That's where it could try to trade to. NDX. NDX looks almost the same. You got the same thing here on the daily, and you got that same overlap. Well, actually, it's not quite the same overlap. Matter of fact, the NDX is different. Now that I look at it, I was thinking it was the same, but you've got a bearish retest regen going on already on the daily, on the weekly chart. And so the NDX actually had a lower low there that it's working off of, and then the other low that was broken, which is here, is really parallel to it. It doesn't overlap, so it's congruent. And so the area that looks very tough to get over here is going to be that little zone in between them. So a slight difference in the way it's set up. Same sort of idea. If we go to the Russell, now the Russell, of course, has been the weakest. Russell gets over and stays over the retest regen on the daily. If we look at it on the weekly, of course, the Russell has a long way to go just to get back up to the retest regen. And in fact, here's where time becomes an issue because you've got more than 6 bars before it gets back up there, which says should be a high probability that this thing should try to trade lower if it gets up to that price point. That price point is the low of the September 28th bar. That's 11. No, actually it's 10 something. Let me get, that was the high I was looking at. 11, it'd be 1078. So that's the Russell. Moving over to Germany, because Germany to me has been the most important overseas index. If we go over and pull Germany up, take a look at it, what we're going to find there is on a daily chart, the German DAX is still stuck in this little retest regen zone here. These are all bearish retest regen zones. In other words, it tested into it, got all the way up, did a full retest, failed, and then started to try and regenerate lower. First order of business this week is going to see if this thing can push back lower. If it does, you got to think this is the area it's going to try to push to. And then if you take that and say, hey, if it turns around there, where can it go? Well, it can get the ABCD structure up to try to get to the swing point high off that move. If you look at it on a weekly basis, here too, you have a bearish retest regen going, and this one's actually going on right now as we speak as well. Just got into that area on Friday, so you push down. Now, what we should have seen, and this actually is something to keep in mind, what we should have seen is a continued, hold or push farther down on a break of multiple swing points. It didn't. It came right back up to do the bearish retest regen. That wasn't the most likely scenario, but that is what happened. So that tells us that it had a little bit more strength than we would have expected. And so in general, that tells us that, hey, maybe these markets are going to try to finally get a decent bounce, one that actually sticks and takes us up to higher prices versus all these lows we've been seeing of late. But we won't know that for a little bit longer, and we'll probably know based on the action in the DAX and in the NASDAQ. If I look over at the CAC's actually showing a little bit more strength. We see it here over the retest regen zone, the bearish one, on the daily, and cutting into the weekly one. And just like we showed over on the domestic indexes, this overlap of these two zones is going to be the tough spot on this one. If we move over and take a look at Switzerland, my friends up in Switzerland, let's see what that one looks like. So the bearish retest regen zone on the daily. Now this one's kind of interesting because this one went into it and has started to try and regenerate to the downside. So that's what that one looks like. And so as it's trying to come back down, right? Volume pushing up here, and so it's trying to regenerate down to the downside. Now they also had the break of multiple swing points, multiple time frames. And you got a little bounce back up, tested into this swing point low, this big swing point low. Looks to me like it's going to try to push back down now. And this is one of those, if we look at it on a monthly chart, right, this is down here pressing against those lows, and it's pressing them with some decent volume, but doesn't look like enough volume to break it down yet. And so the Swiss market probably, just like most of the market, is going to hold for a while longer on the long-term time frame. Moving over to Hong Kong while we're over here on the world markets. Hong Kong, a little bounce up, not a lot to it, but it does bounce. You're way underneath your swing point low, more than 6 bars, so anything pushing back up into that is probably going to fail. And same thing here on the monthly. And I think if you look at any of the Asian stocks, any of the emerging market stocks, they all have kind of that same situation. Finally, before I leave the world markets, I want to take a look at Toronto. Toronto, nice big bounce, right? Got over the swing point high, fell back, but it's doing some long tails and dojis here. So I like the way this one's starting to set up in terms of ABCD structure, and actually it's probably easier to draw it on the monthly. Let's do that, not on the monthly, but the weekly. So let's do it there. And so if I look at it over here, you can see the clean ABCD structure that's starting to try and take form to take this back higher. Bullish retest or a bearish retest regen is up to there, and you could see how it could take it right up to a full retest regen on that swing point low that was broken. And I should probably look at my Australia market here for my friends over in Aussie land. Let's see what this one looks like. And an undercut, breaks down, breaks swing point lows, doing a bullish or bearish retest, regen gets over it. And so this one kind of is set up the same way as the one we just looked at in Toronto, right? And they're both commodity countries, so that makes sense too. So you're starting to get some sort of a push here. Probably will get some sort of an ABCD structure to try to take it back up into that area. We could look at a lot of other things. I do want to look at one more thing, and that is the currencies. If we look at the FXE, you can see the FXE. We got that Draghi bar that we talked about a number of times. You had the expansion here. You go up, you have more expansion possibilities to the top side, but it does look like it's going to try to come back up there now and test that higher area. And if you look at the yen, it's the same situation, right? Nice big push up and trying to push back the other way. All of that, I bring it up because those are the biggest components of the dollar index. And when we look at the dollar index, of course, is doing exactly the opposite. So if you take and pull in the range here, you got a range about there. The dollar looks like it's going to try to trade to the downside. And if the dollar trades to the downside, that's going to put euro up, yen up. That's going to put pressure on those equities and probably put pressure back on ours. And so if you look at everything together, all things considered, looks to me like a fairly mixed week coming in. It's the end of February. I suspect what you're going to see is you're going to see these equity markets struggle to get higher, probably pull back, do a little bit of a retrace, and then try to push back to the top side. So that's it for tonight. And as always, I thank you for joining me. You tell a friend, tell two. I appreciate it. And I appreciate all of those who've already done that and continue to do that. It's much appreciated on my part. You have a great night. Take care, and I'll see you next time.